Hi, how are you?
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I'm going to start letting people in just a second. I just want to check something. All right.
Morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Very well. How are you?
Good. Long time no see.
I was going to say,
Yeah,
we have Canada represented now.
we do have Canada represented.
And now we have Mexico represented because Jennifer Castro is with us.
Super fun.
Awesome. We are truly a global group.
I was just going to say you've gone global. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Kelly, how you been?
Good. How about you?
Working my way through it.
Right?
All right. We'll give it a few more people for a few more people. We'll give it a few more people for a few more minutes to join. How's that? I think I need more coffee. All right, Greg, you can help me let people in.
I have been, yes.
Awesome. Thank you. So usually we're a little more lively when we start off. But anyway, I guess everybody just can't wait for the topic of the day. And we have no Dennis this morning, no Dennis Stretch. Anyway, I'm not even going to go off on any rants or anything. I want to go right into today's subject. So I want to just tell you all a little bit about my friend Dawn, who's with us today, who I've known for, how long is it, Dawn? Probably 8 years, 10 years?
No, since when I started my business. So more like 04, 05.
Oh, wow, that's
06.
right. That's right. Yeah, it's been a very long time that we've known each other. Dawn and I were actually originally introduced by a mutual client, or actually, no, he was my client. He was your friend. He wasn't a client of yours, was he?
Yeah, no, Jeremy.
So, mutual friend, and Dawn has been running Kaplan HR, which is a firm that handles human resources for people. I'll let her tell you more about it because she can do it better than I can. But just very quickly over the years, Dawn and I have referred clients to one another quite a bit over the years. And anytime I have any kind of a question regarding any kind of HR issue, Dawn's the person I call. So before I say that next inappropriate thing that I want to say, because I think it's funny, I call Dawn and make sure that it's okay to say that inappropriate thing that I think is going to be funny, but somebody else might not find it so funny. Anyway, with that in mind, Dawn, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us and to be with us. I got a peek at your outline for what you wanted to go over today, and so I don't want to sort of waste any time because I think there's a lot of really good information that you're going to cover for us. So I kind of want to hand it right off to you to take over. And I suppose the best thing is probably to have you start by just telling us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and whom you do it for.
Okay, sounds good. Good morning, everyone. And I should say Seth has been great at fixing all the QuickBooks things that I screw up. So I call him up and say, hey, I messed this up and can't figure it out. So anyway, like Seth said, I've had my business since 04. Prior to that, I was in-house for a number of years, but I do outsourced HR. So I work with a few different types of clients to help with their needs. So one would be, I work with clients that have employers that have under 100 employees, but don't have a need to hire a full-time HR, but still need someone. And so I act as their HR department. So I may go in once a week, every other week, depending on their needs. I also do interim work. So if someone has someone who goes on a leave or leaves a company, so goes like on a medical leave or might leave a company, I'll step in and hold down the fort. And usually that's can be anywhere up to like 500-600 employees, and just help manage the function. And I usually help find them someone. So I help do recruiting as well, but on an hourly basis. So I don't do a percentage of salary. I just do an hourly basis and screen the, place the ad, screen the resumes, and make introductions with those that are a good fit. And then I do audits. So going into companies who just want to know they're doing things right. So I have a full questionnaire that we go through, and then at the completion of that, I tell them a number of things I want to see. And at the completion of that, and it's on site usually, except for maybe during this time, we might do it over Zoom, and they're holding things up for me, showing me what they've got. But not totally ideal, but it is what it is right now. So I then give them an assessment with recommendations on what they need to do, what needs to be improved. So what's being done well, what needs improvement. And then lastly is a lot of startups. I guess startups and project-based work. So startups, a lot of people will take things that they had in the past and say, oh, I can use this now. And, that's not so likely in California, as laws have changed and gotten stricter over time. And so just, help them get started on the right foot. So that might be doing an employee handbook and a new hire to separation packet. And so like the new hire to separation packet is everything they need from pre-employment, new hire, everything in between, and then separation. And so I, get their logo, brand it, create it for them, based on the type of industry and if there's anything unique to them, and then get them started on the right foot. And then they, will utilize me as they need me as they grow. So that's a little bit about me. But I've had my business and so forth, and just, enjoy doing this and helping clients out. So I always tell them I'd rather have you call me than go to the internet. That's where we're at. But I put together a presentation for you this morning with things that I thought might be useful with your business, with your clients, and, maybe some of the questions that you get. So we can go through that. I did a PowerPoint presentation, and you're welcome to stop me as we go through it and ask me questions. And we can explain anything, and you're welcome to call me after and ask any type of additional questions. So Seth, should I share?
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen and just walk through it. I think, and I'm sure questions will arise as you go through the material.
Okay. How do I make it here? Sorry, I'm not great with sharing my screen.
No problem.
Seth, how do I get rid of the top portion of this?
So you should be able, if you click your mouse over the top portion and drag it, it should be able to.
Oh, just drag it?
Move it out of the way. Yeah. And then when you do that, there's a toolbar at the top that has some different little symbols. The leftmost one, which is like a little underscore, that should minimize it.
It's because I have it as a PDF. Sorry guys, I did this before and it worked. Now it's not working. Hold on.
It's what we can see the PDF perfectly fine.
You have? Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to enlarge it for you. Okay.
You could try to
It's
click
not working.
view and see if full screen is an option.
Okay, well, we're leaving it, I guess, is this.
I mean, it looks plenty big on my screen. I don't know if
It
anybody
does?
else.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
It's just mine probably. Okay, so what you need to know. So what I put here is so California minimum wage. So there's minimum wage that went up as of July 1st. And then there's California that goes up. Well, at least so some went up depending what city you're in. So if you scroll down, and I can send this all to you in a better version if you want later, but it basically goes through each of the cities. So California is the lowest for minimum wage. It's $12 right now if you have less than 25 employees, and $13 an hour if you have over 26 employees. But if you live in certain areas, there's certain cities that might have a particular wage. And so if you look down this list, you'll see that. So like, for example, LA City, if you're in that incorporated area of LA City and you're under 26 employees, you've got one rate, and if you're over 26, you have another. So some of them are under 25 and over 26, and some of them are just a blanket. This is the rate for where you are. So July 1st was a big increase, and then there's another one coming January 1st. Anyone have questions on minimum wage?
Nope. And then of course there's people from other areas besides California. So
Oh, yes, I know. I heard you say that. I didn't know that beforehand. So
No,
until
that's
you
fine.
guys said that on the call,
So
Canada,
where can they go
Mexico.
to research this kind of information? I mean, do they just Google it or?
Usually, yeah, usually you can Google minimum, what you put your city and put, minimum wage for, Canada, minimum wage for Mexico, or for your particulars where you live, and it will tell you what it is.
Okay.
But you can reach out to me if you need it as well, and I can get that for you.
And so we have a question in the chat that minimum wage is a requirement and not a suggestion.
Correct.
Okay.
It is a requirement. So as minimum wage goes up, you have to adjust your employees if you're paying at that, if they're at that rate, under the rate, the new rate.
Right. Okay.
So yes, unfortunately, it just keeps going up.
Yeah.
Okay. Any others in the chat?
That is all I see. One person was suggesting that if you hit F11 on your keyboard, that'll go full screen on your PDF.
Nope.
Not working. All right,
So
no worries.
weird. I don't know why it's not.
And then at the
Okay.
top right of your PDF, there's like a little double pointed arrow. Did you try that?
There we go.
There it is. Yeah.
I don't know why that didn't work before, but it worked now. It just needed someone to say it, and then it worked.
Okay. There it is.
That's how it goes. Okay. This is why I do HR. I don't to worry about the technology. Okay, so let's move on. So no other questions, correct?
We do have a question about tip-based jobs, servers and whatnot. Are they exempt from minimum wage, or are they tied
No.
to half
They-
minimum wage?
They have to make the minimum wage, and then the tips are on top of that. Same with, by the way, same with bonuses or commissions. It has to be the minimum wage. So for example, I should mention that in California, when you're doing for an exempt employee, it has to be 2 times the minimum wage. And so right now in California, hold on one second, the minimum wage is,
And you might want to clarify what an exempt employee is.
yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah, one second. So an exempt employee is someone who's salaried, and a non-exempt employee is someone who's hourly. And so hourly is what is this grid here is what you need to follow. And then for exempt, anyone that's salary, there's guidelines that's probably something I should have put in this presentation. An exempt employee there's guidelines that they follow as to what makes them salaried. And so the general guideline for a salary employee is that you make a certain dollar amount. And so for in California, the dollar amount for under 26 employees is $49,920, so $49,920. And if you're 26 or more employees, it's $54,080. And so that's important, that anyone who's exempt has to meet that salary level. They also have to have at least 2 direct reports, be able to make 50% of their own decisions, as well as making hiring and firing decisions, are some of the criteria for it. There's others, and there's different types of exemptions, which could be a whole other call, but there's administrative exemption, a professional exemption, a creative exemption. And so there's different exemptions that might, outside of the basic exemption, could make someone a exempt employee, so a salaried employee. And so when you're looking at exempt salary, you don't use these numbers so when they say, you'll hear people say, oh, exempt is 2 times minimum wage, but it's not 2 times this minimum wage that's listed here. You take California's minimum wage, which is the $12 or $13 an hour, and you would multiply it by 2 times minimum wage. So you don't use like LA City, it's at $14.25. You don't use that times 2. You use the California.
So Don, we have a couple of questions in the chat. Good question from Tina. If I hire a person out of state, but they're working for my company that's in California, whose minimum wage law applies?
There's the state that they're in.
So it's the home state.
Yes.
And so I think the same thing comes under the heading of, obviously, if we have employees working virtually from different states, so it's based on the home state where the employee lives.
Yeah.
And then
Going back
to the tip question, did that change? Because I thought, my understanding years ago at least, was that you could pay like a restaurant server less than minimum wage because really the way they were making their money was from the tips. Did
No,
that
but that's
change, or is
something,
that
see, like your comment from years ago, that's when the startups want to use things from years ago and say, oh, I can use it now. So no, they have to make minimum wage because you can't guarantee that they're going to get tips.
okay? So that did change. Then
You
at
can't
some point.
guarantee that they're going to make that amount of money. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So like same, like even like the meal period where you have to take a meal period by your 5th hour from the start of your shift, like someone from, that only got implemented, I don't know what, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I'm probably off because I know everything seems so close, but that got implemented then, whereas that never used to be an issue before.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's things that you just can't, that, people know is what they've always done, but can't be any longer.
Right. And of course, different
Yeah.
states have
Yeah.
different rules here.
So yes, absolutely. So overtime is different in different states. So there's an overtime slide in here, but overtime is, some states are per day and week, and some states are weekly. Some are just per day. So it varies where you are.
Right. Okay.
So some of the things I'm going to talk about. So for those, I don't know, there's Canada and Mexico, I heard, those might be those are going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next is, so last year, the state put out a legislation that said that, that all employees now have to go through harassment training. So previously it was only those who manage. So anyone that manages employees had to do 2 hours of training every 2 years. So that now has changed last year, and the state said that anyone who has 5 employees or more, they now have to go through harassment training, but that training is 1 hour, and that's also done every 2 years. So the requirement was that last year was that they completed it by January 1st of 2020, and then it got extended, and now it has to be completed. I'm sorry, it had to be finished by 2019. It then got extended to January 1st of 2020. And you'll see it says January 1st, 2021. So by the last day of December, you have to have your harassment training completed.
And what does DFEH stand for?
Department for Employment Housing.
All right, cool. That's interesting. So it's 5 or more employees. So under 5 employees.
5 or more employees.
Yeah.
And there's a number of, so what this is saying is, so everyone last year and up till now, up until July 1st, everyone was paying for their training. And so you would see the training was anywhere from $30 to $45, and sometimes even more. A live training could be anywhere from $800 to $1,200 to do a 1 hour or 2 hour training. And so now what they've come out with is free training for the non-supervisory employees. So anyone that doesn't supervise at their 1 hour of training, the state as of July 1st will now offer free training in a variety of languages. So English, Spanish, Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, Tagalog, and in closed caption, which is not something that was being offered before by by those who are doing harassment training.
Gotcha. And Jennifer made a comment.
So this is great for employers because it was an expensive task for employers, especially small ones who had to invest in doing this.
Gotcha.
You also have to train, by the way, anyone who is a new hire and anyone that is promoted into a job within 6 months.
Still with the 5 employee minimum? Or?
Correct.
Okay.
Still with the 5 employee minimum.
So Jennifer says Mexico's a moot point. She has clients in California and Canada. She just lives in Mexico.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Jennifer.
All right, cool. That's interesting to know. So just don't hire more than 4 employees and you get out of this, right?
It's not that bad. It's a fairly boring thing, but some of them are more fun than others. So if anyone needs a good recommendation, let me know. Some of them are definitely more entertaining.
Right. And I assume contractors that I might hire don't count as an employee, right? For this purpose.
Temporary employees, though, will. So essentially anyone on your payroll.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. As soon as somebody gets a paycheck, has taxes taken out, they count.
Yes.
Which now in California, you pretty much have to hire everybody anyway if they're doing what you substantially do. So,
although there is a law waiting to be passed on that we'll see if there's an expansion to the AB5, but it's not. We don't know yet what's going to happen with it. So that gives a little more flexibility.
All right.
So we'll see. All right. So paid family leave. So paid family leave. I'll explain some background first. So when an employee needs to take time off, the employer is responsible, and depending on the size of the business, is responsible for providing a leave of absence. So if you're at 5 employees, it might be pregnancy disability leave if somebody is pregnant, but then at the end of their pregnancy disability leave wants to take something called baby bonding. If somebody is at 20 to 49 employees, there's something called parental leave that it got implemented a year ago, I think, a year or two ago. Parental leave allows an employee to take time off to care for a child. It also allows a father to take time off to care for a child. And then if you have 50 employees, then you get into FMLA, family medical leave, and SIFRA, which is California. So those are all leaves. So the employer, depending on size, might be obligated to provide a leave of absence. So usually it's unpaid unless the employer has decided that they want to pay their employees. Some employers will decide that they want to pay someone at a certain management level, that they want to pay a portion of their salary if they're out. Some employers may say, I want to integrate with the state's pay, which we'll go into in a second. And those are when they pay, but generally leave of absence from a company are unpaid. So then you have the pay. And so the pay is paid family leave. For somebody who's themselves disabled, it would be disability leave. But I didn't go into that because that's not a new law. I'm just highlighting some new things that I thought would be interesting to you. But paid family leave, so disability is if you have to take time off to care for yourself. So if an employee has to take time off to care for themselves, they're sick and the doctor puts them off of work, the company provides the leave and the state provides the pay. So paid family leave is when you have to care for someone. So it's an immediate family member. So if you see it says child, parent, parent-in-law, grandparent, grandchild, sibling, spouse, or registered domestic partner, or to bond with a child entering the family through birth, adoption, or foster care placement. So what's new? So we provide the leave, the state provides the pay is paid family leave. The paid family leave, the new law here is as of July 1st, it went from 6 weeks of time off of partial pay to 8 weeks. And so that is the new law. So it's a portion of pay. So it's usually 60% of pay. And it was up to 6 weeks. And as of July 1st, it's now 8 weeks. They have not announced yet what it will be January 1st. Likely it will be 8 weeks. When they put the law out at the beginning of this year, they said, we'll let you know at the end of this year, at the end of 2020, what it will be for next year. But what it looks like so far is it's not going to be a takeaway. It should be 8 weeks. There is some expansions, like they're looking at putting the leave is actually, by the way, the paid family is actually 12 weeks of time, but the pay is only 8 weeks. So you can take another 4 weeks unpaid. There's just no pay through the state. So you would just continue the leave for 12 weeks. And the thing with paid family leave is it can be taken intermittently over time. So meaning that if somebody, for example, is taking baby bonding, you can take it until the baby turns 1, and you can take it intermittent. So you can take 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks throughout that year. If you're caring for someone, same thing, you can take it intermittently or all at one time. Does anyone have questions on this law? Or this pay, I should say?
So many years ago, when I had to go out on medical leave from my job, the pay was like on a scale, like over time, the pay was reduced, right?
So that would be state disability. And
Okay.
state disability looks at your earnings and looks at how much you are earning to how much you get paid.
Okay.
So paid family leave does too, but paid family leave actually pays more than disability pay. So paid family leave pays, I believe, last time I looked, I think it was $300 to $1,300 a week is what paid family leave will pay.
Okay, got it.
So somebody, depending on your earning level, can make up to $1,300 a week. Whereas like with disability depends on what your earnings were. So, and it's on a scale.
Right. Okay, and so if I'm an employer and somebody wants to go out on family medical leave, what do they have to do?
So if somebody wants to go out on leave, you go to your if they have an HR department or whoever's managing that function, and you let them know that you want to go on a leave. Usually in most handbooks, it will say that they request advance notice. Most are 14 days. Sometimes it's just, you just don't know. But if it's a planned leave, I like to have notice. So you go, you ask, there's generally paperwork that gets filled out that says that you're going out on an approved leave of absence, and it's well documented. You sign off between you and the employer and the employee sign off on those documents. You're provided, they should be provided. There's pamphlets that the state provides. There are pamphlets that have to be given at the time of hire, but then also when someone goes on a leave. So there is a disability leave pamphlet, and there is a paid family leave pamphlet that is required by the state to be given. You give them that. On those pamphlets, it has a link on how an employee goes on. I usually recommend the computer. It's the easiest way to apply for these leaves. You go on the computer, there's a number of questions you fill out. For disability and paid, well, for disability, you get a code at the end. That code goes to the doctor's office. The doctor's office fills out their portion of it, and then the employer gets a paper in the mail. I wish I don't have one with me. They get a piece of paper in the mail. They fill out. The employee went out on this date, the employee's date of birth, the employee's rate of pay. You fill that out, you send it back in, and then the employee will start getting paid. Same with paid family leave. The only difference is that the employer will get a form to fill out. You just don't have to go through a doctor's approval. So meaning someone will apply for paid family leave, they do it online, and it's just them, and it goes to the state. The doctor doesn't have to complete anything, because the doctor's not putting you out on a paid family leave. You're choosing to go on a paid family leave to care for someone.
Got it. All right, very
Makes
good.
sense. It's a little bit lengthy of a process, but it
sounds like something I'd probably want to hire you to help me with if it came down to it, right? Like just to make sure I'm dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's.
You want to, there's also, I will tell you, paid family leave does not have a wait period. So paid family leave, you're eligible for paid day one from the state, whereas state disability, and that ended last year. It used to be that there was a 7-day wait period. And that was changed. And then disability, however, does have a wait period. So it is 7 days. That 7 days does include weekends. So it's actually 5 work days. So if somebody were taking a disability, getting disability pay, I'd ask them, what do you want to use for your first 5 days, if at all? Some employers will require an employee to use 5 days of something, whether it's sick leave or another accrual, so vacation or PTO, and some will not. And paid family leave you don't have to worry about because it's on day one.
Got it. All right.
Okay, this is a lot. I'm just gonna explain to you. I just put it there because this is a new for the COVID. So it says, if you bring back an employee, do you have to have them fill out new hire paperwork? So generally, some employers will decide that they don't want them to. They may have them sign a confidentiality agreement, the employee handbook, but as far as your other new hire paper, you don't necessarily have to have them re-sign everything. What I usually ask them is with the form, with the I-9, I would look at so when an employer fills in employer and employee fill out an I-9, the employee has to provide you with backup that says that they're able to work in the United States. So everything has to be active at the time that you take it. So if you have someone coming back, I would look at that form and see if something's expired on it. And that's when you would have to redo your Form I-9. So to reiterate one thing, there is on the bottom, you don't have to complete a new form, but there is a portion on the bottom of the I-9 form that says recertification. And that's where you would take an ID and recertify their I-9 form. So you would just take whatever the form is that's expired. Usually it's something in column A or column B, and you would recertify it, and it asks you document number. It says, and then you sign off on it, the expiration date, and you sign off on it, and that's it. But I ask people also about their W-4, their taxes. California has a new W-4 form. It's a horrible form. I know you guys, I'm sure, have seen it. It's horrible. It makes no sense. Employees have a very difficult time filling it out. But but unfortunately, I, as an HR person, can't give them advice. So I usually will give them I tell them either to call their tax accountant or financial person, or there's a link that the state's provided that gives, you can do it electronically. You can answer questions electronically, and then at the end it comes up with a number. Have any of you guys seen that form or that link? I mean,
I feel like I've seen the form. I've seen people sharing like screenshots of the form, like to show how crazy it is.
oh yeah, I can also share the link with you guys. But it's a link that lets you fill it out electronically instead of trying to do it on the paper form, and it makes it a little bit easier because it asks you quite more questions.
And a couple things from the chat. So Shannon
Yeah.
says 34 states have a state version of the W-4, have their own version of the W-4. Shannon's kind of our resident payroll expert here. And then Tina says, thanks for explaining the difference between laid off and furloughed. She wasn't sure the difference regarding hiring specifically. Megan says, I do contract work and my business is a corporation. I had a client require me to file an I-9 for proof of employment eligibility. Is that a new thing? Their lawyer said that it was the only way they could verify that I was allowed to perform work in the U.S. That seems weird to me. That's corporation.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, you shouldn't, as an I-9, that's establishing an employer-employee relationship, and you should never have to fill that out.
Yeah, not as a corporation. It sounds like they were trying to hire you, Megan, as an individual and not as a corp. And I'm sure you made it clear to them that you were a corp, but I think sometimes that kind of thing comes out of sort of ignorance. You know, I've had people require similar things of me, even when I've explained, no, I'm a corporation, you're not hiring me as an individual, like this shouldn't be required. And they just, and then if their lawyer says they have to do it, then they just assume that's what they have to do.
But even I'm a sole proprietor and I've never filled one out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I recently had somebody who was considering hiring me to consult with them send me something to fill out that was very much more consistent with what you would ask somebody to do when you're looking to hire them. And I even wrote them to that effect. And frankly, it was a lot of work they were asking me to do just before they even became a client, before they paid me anything. And I was like, look, guys, I'm not interested. Like it was just, sometimes it's not worth taking on the client, because if you have that kind of misunderstanding right up front, it's probably only going to mean more problems down the road, most likely. That's been my experience anyway.
So let me comment on a couple questions here. The laid off and furlough. So just so everyone knows, laid off is you're laying someone off of it, obviously. But furloughed, if you furlough someone and it's more than 10 days and they're not getting paid, it's then considered a layoff.
Interesting.
So if anyone doesn't get paid, so when you're like during this time, especially during this pandemic, a lot of people did furloughs. And a lot of people did furloughs because they wanted to continue their benefit insurance. And with that, I advise that the employers to reach out to their benefits broker and see if there's something that they need to put in their contract and the contract with their carriers that say it's okay for them to continue their health insurance during a period of time. So that's something to look at, and a lot of the benefit brokers are rewriting the contracts to accommodate that. But a furlough, so if you don't intend to pay them before the next period or more than 10 days, it turns into a layoff. And so the best recommendation is always that the sick time should be paid. Not sick time, I'm sorry. Sick time doesn't get paid out, but your vacation time should be paid out at the time of separation if you think that's going to happen. Because when you separate someone, any unused accrued time to date gets paid out. And so you should really look at doing that if you think your furlough will be longer than 10 days of no pay. Some people during this pandemic did pay out sick time just because it looks good to pay that out. It's not required, but there were a number of companies attorneys that recommended paying it out. And then the other question was about the yoga instructors. And so unfortunately so it says to yoga dance studio owners and the instructors and those who work for greeting a desk for less than 10 hours a week. So yes, they're all employees. They would go on as part-time employees. They would be eligible. The only thing they would be eligible for, generally, unless the employer chose otherwise, is for sick time. Any employee on your payroll is eligible for sick time. But they would be an employee. But yoga and dance studio, the instructors usually are employees as well. A lot of people want to make them independent contractors, but it's not as likely.
Yeah, I couldn't even see an argument for people working the greeting desk being contractors, but the instructors I could kind of see like, hey, we might need to bring in an outside instructor to
Yeah, if
teach.
they,
Yeah.
yeah, Seth, if they have other clients, that might be an exception where they go and work at other places. So there's, ask somebody, that's something to discuss beforehand, but that's a topic right now. Because especially like, same thing as trainers in a gym. All the trainers like at a Equinox or something, those are all employees. But people do want to make them contractors.
I mean, years ago, before all this, I made the decision that anybody who was going to do bookkeeping work for me, with a very rare exception, was going to come in as an employee, just because I didn't want the headaches of having to worry about having to prove that they've met the requirements for being an independent contractor. I just said, you know what, it's easier to just put them on payroll and do it that way. Sure, it's going to cost me a little more, but because of the payroll taxes, but to me, it was a smart move because I just didn't have to worry about any of that anymore. It just eliminated that whole area of sort of friction and thinking, and it freed this up to focus on thinking about other things.
Well, and Kelly, you're right. At small studios, a lot of people don't want the expense because once you put them on payroll, you have to pay workers' comp, you have to pay all the taxes, and it gets expensive for people. So a lot of times they put them on, but they shouldn't always be. So. Especially with the AB5, and it's gotten so small now, is who can actually be an independent contractor. They're still independent, and Shannon or Kelly still independent contractors, even if they work. It's a gray area, to be honest. But you just have to take the chance, honestly, that if you think that somebody's working at other places and they want to be an independent contractor, a lot of people want to be independent contractors. But you just take the chance that you don't have an employee that's going to go and file that they were misclassified. What happened during this with the pandemic is that a lot of independent contractors, people that were misclassified, went and applied for unemployment, which there is now. After the partway into it, they established a fund. The PPA. There was something, I forget, I'm drawing a blank on what the name is.
PUA.
PUA, thank you. I knew it was something. Yeah, the PUA, which is for independent contractors, but at the beginning it wasn't. It was only established, probably a month later. And so there were people who were going and applying, and so that might be an issue later with it coming back to employers and saying that this person applied and were they really, were they truly an independent contractor? So that's that. Okay. Hold on, let me get back there. All right, employment applications. So this changed last year, so I don't know, I just put this on, I didn't know who knew about this, but you can no longer ask about criminal history information prior to a conditional offer, and you can no longer ask about salary history. You can ask, and you can ask an applicant, what is your salary expectation? Most oftentimes you'll find that they'll just say, oh, well, my last job I was making, X. But you can no longer say, well, what were you making? Like before, you used to go down the resume and say, hey, what were you making at this job? What were you making at this job? That you can no longer do. And you can no longer do the criminal history. You can't have it before it was, have you been convicted of a felony or misdemeanor? That can no longer be on there. But once you've made a job offer, you're able to do a background check. And with background checks, you want to be consistent with what you're doing. And so if you're doing it for one, you have to do it for all. You can't pick and choose.
On the criminal history one, just out of my own curiosity, once they give you the job offer,
then you can inquire. But usually it's about
find that information, then can you say, I don't want you, I don't want to have you be
well, if you're going to do background checks, then your job offer would say it's contingent upon the completion of a background check.
Okay.
So you're making a contingent job offer, and then it's contingent on that background coming back clear. And then if it doesn't come back clear, the problem is that now there's something called the green law, and there's steps you have to take if you find out that somebody has a background, a criminal background, and things that you have to then inquire about and think about the way that you can lay them off, essentially, or like not accept them. So you have to make sure you do your research on, is what's coming back. So let's say that somebody comes back and they have DUIs. Well, that shouldn't harm, you know, unless that's your job requires you to drive for the job, then that shouldn't be a reason that you don't hire them. So you have to really look at, you know, depending what comes back on that criminal history, does it impact the job?
Yeah, because DUI is like with truck drivers, right? Like
Right, exactly. So like if they were driving for the
Definitely.
job, then obviously that's a given. But if somebody's has a receptionist job and they've got a DUI, so as long as they have a
Right,
reasonable
that's
means to
no
get to
criteria.
work, that you can't really use that, because if driving doesn't affect their job, then why would you not hire them?
Right.
So
So
the
that's the
criminal
thing.
history information prior to a conditional job offer, that, I mean, just that makes it sound like I can't, what do you call it? I can't look into that regardless, but you're saying it's conditioned upon whether or not the
job
nature
offer.
of their criminal infractions in their record would impact their ability to do the job. In those cases, I can say, hey, I can't hire you. Like if I'm an accountant hiring somebody to do work on somebody's financial information and sensitive banking, you know, access to sensitive banking, and they have some kind of fraud on their record, financial related, I can,
Right, that would be
yeah, okay.
exactly. So once you've made that contingent job offer, then you can do a background. And they
Right.
usually come back, like background checks, depending who you use, come back in 1 to 2 days, usually, you know, nowadays. All right. Am I required to, this is always one that gets, you know, people don't know. Am I required to pay travel time? And if so, what can I pay it at a lower rate? So yes, you are required to pay travel time for anything outside someone's normal commute to work. So when somebody is, anywhere they're driving, you need to pay travel time. You can pay it at a lower rate of pay. So let's say, and this is only for hourly employees. It's not for any salary employees. So for hourly employees, if someone's making $20 an hour and they're going to go drive 5 hours, you know, you have them going to, let's say, a seminar and they're driving there instead of flying there, then they, you can pay them at a minimum wage if you so choose. Most people, I don't see most people doing that because it's usually during work hours. And you can't see her. Sorry, my daughter walked in.
It's okay. Hi, daughter.
This is Chloe. Say hello. So, okay, Chloe's going to join us. So you can pay it at a minimum wage. I don't see people doing it if it's during work hours. They might do it if it's after work hours, and that, you know, that they're going to start driving and do that so that it's not such a huge expense. It does go into overtime though. So anything over, depending where you are, either 8 hours in a day or 40 hours in a work week. And then you are responsible also for mileage. And so salary employees who are driving can get reimbursed for mileage as well as your hourly. So for hourly, you're paying travel time plus mileage.
You know, and just one thought on this.
Yeah.
And this is more of a philosophical comment than anything else. You know, these days especially, the culture you create at a company has become so much more important than ever before. If you're sitting here trying to nitpick whether or not to pay them for travel time, I think you're missing something very important. Freaking just pay them. Make it easy for them. Make their life comfortable. Don't nitpick about this kind of stuff. It's not creating an environment that people are going to be excited about coming and working at. You know what I mean?
Right. It's true. Because then people are going to see that you're, you know, just what your culture's like, you know,
Yeah.
the nitpicking. You don't want that.
Yeah, just make it easy for employees. Make it comfortable. Make them comfortable. Make them feel safe. You know, that's the way you create a culture in a company that people want to come and work for. You know, if you're sitting here saying, "Well, do I have to pay them their travel?" You know, then it's like, I fear that you're leaning in the direction of creating the wrong culture. I mean, Dawn, you work with a lot of different companies. How would you say your experience sort of leans you on that kind of thing? I mean, I know that as an HR consultant, you just have to tell them, look, here's what the rules are, right? But do you see
Yeah,
a
but
lot of?
I'm able to make recommendations, thankfully.
Mhm.
And, you know, most people, we just pay their regular, yes, it's a California perk, I guess, evidently. Most people pay, and it is mostly, sorry, some of this is mostly California specific. I didn't know that it was outside. So, yes, so I usually tell people it's, you know, most people at short distances, it's not terribly, you know, long, and it's, if they're a good employee and worth your while, you know, you just don't want to, it's good for morale just to pay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Any more questions on this?
I don't think so. Uh-oh. Yeah, just for a quick, just because it's come up a couple times, Dawn and I are both based in California, so a lot of this is prepared based on California rules. It would be very difficult to spend an hour covering all the rules for every state also. So just to keep that context in mind, that if, obviously if you're in a different state, you'll want to research that state's rules. And Dawn, am I right in assuming that
Yes.
you can research the rules in other states for
So-
people?
Yes, I can. And so here's the thing, California is the strictest state. So if you follow this,
You're
you'll
probably
be safe.
covered, right?
You're covered. So yeah, okay. So can I hold an employee's final paycheck if he or she fails to turn in company equipment or required paperwork for expense reimbursements? So this one gets tricky because, so what's been said is that you can't mail a person's paycheck if they don't tell you that you can do so. So in California, you have to say to someone, are you okay if I mail your paycheck? And then you generally want to ask for it in writing. But however, there's guidelines that say that if an employee resigns, that you, with more than 72 hours notice, that you have to give them their paycheck upon separation. But if somebody resigns and gives you less than 72 hours notice, you then have 72 hours to pay them. So it gets tricky because it's like what this law says is that you can direct deposit though. But really you're not supposed to direct deposit a final paycheck. It's supposed to be a live check. During this pandemic, however, though, there have been exceptions made that you can do direct deposit. But you cannot take, if somebody has equipment, you can't reduce their pay. You can't take back the money for what they owe you. What you can do is tell them, I'm going to take you to small claims court. So it's a tricky one, but most oftentimes if somebody isn't coming to pick up their pay, I'd reach out to them and let them know you can submit it in, this says to the, the DLSC, you can submit it in and say that it was unclaimed wages. So I'd first try and reach out to the person who hasn't, picked up their check and let them know that if you don't pick it up, this is where it's going. But it's a bit of a tricky one because people will just send out final checks and, not really care about it. For lack of a better phrase. Let's see, I was on payroll.
So if somebody was on direct deposit and they're terminated and I have to deliver them a check, I guess with most payroll services, I would just tell the payroll service not to direct deposit that check, that I would just print the check or?
Yeah, so the final check is a live check. So yeah, usually they go off a direct deposit and just get a live check. You have a live check because usually you're doing it the hope is you're doing it in person. If you're not doing it in person, then you can, if it's a good termination, you can ask them, do you want me to direct deposit or do you want me to mail it if they're not on site? If it's not a good termination, you're generally ready to do a termination in person and you have the check and all your exit paperwork handy to be able to give them.
Right, but I'm saying, so when I go to process that final check,
You just take them off direct.
Yeah, I have to take them off direct deposit. So I have to call the payroll company and tell them, hey, this is this person's last paycheck. Don't process it as direct deposit. I'm going to print it. You have to tell them.
Right.
Because normally if I go into Paychecks or ADP in their online portal and I just process the check, unless I change that direct deposit status, it's going to go. I'm just thinking about the logistics of it.
Yeah, from a payroll standpoint, I don't know that you have to call them every time. I think you can just delete I don't know if you delete their direct deposit or there's a way to stop it. Because I know that we don't always call. I've used different systems, Paylocity, Paychecks. I use ADP too, but I don't usually cut the final check. So I'm not sure quite how that's done.
Maybe Shannon knows how that gets handled because she's, like I said, she's got a payroll company.
Okay.
A lot of times I don't even know if it's somebody's last check.
Okay.
Okay. I wasn't lit up, so I wasn't sure you guys could hear me. But yeah, most of the time I'll know that it was their last check. The next time I run payroll, I'm like, oh, there's no hours for this person. They're like, oh yeah, we fired them or they quit and last check was their last check.
Yeah.
But Minnesota doesn't have the requirement where the last check has to be paper.
Okay.
We have the choice, and we also have, if they quit, we can pay them on the next scheduled payroll.
Okay.
So we don't
we
have that
have
72
in
hour.
California, we have 72 hours.
Yeah. Well, I have clients in a lot of different states, and I refer to Minnesota because that's where 90% of my payroll clients are, because that's where I live. And but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different states, and I know California is definitely the most strict with within 72 hours, no matter what, and that it has to be a live check. But I think you can still get it in writing that they're authorized to do their final check
You
as direct
can.
deposit. But a lot
Yes.
of times, some of the payroll companies cannot do a 72-hour turnaround on a direct deposit.
Whoops. Close.
So
Oops. There you go. Right. A lot of payroll, like I just ran into that actually the other day. And so we had to write a manual check because paychecks could not, they weren't able to cut it in time for us.
So here's an interesting question. On the live Facebook feed, Larry's watching. He says, what if they have commissions that can't be calculated till the end of the month?
Commissions are different. Commissions can be given out at the timeline based on your commission timeline. They
Got
could
it.
be paid out later.
So the 72-hour requirement doesn't apply.
Right.
Okay. Cool. Anybody else have any other questions about this? It's funny. I was sitting in a pizzeria here in downtown Burbank a few years back one day, witnessing this exact kind of thing going on, where the guy who evidently ran the pizzeria had fired one of his employees, and the employee's father was in there because he hadn't issued the final check yet. Which I mean, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I know this is illegal for him to do, but he was holding out on the last check, and if I remember correctly, what he was trying to say was that like she would get her check when he does the next payroll or something like that. And I was kind of sitting there shaking my head going, all right, this guy doesn't know the
Yeah.
rule. But that's where this comes from, is a lot of employers have taken advantage of employees, especially as a low wage employee like that, where, let's face it, generally speaking, somebody at that sort of level, for lack of a better word, doesn't necessarily understand the laws and their rights on these things, and employers take advantage of that. So that's why we have these rules now, is to protect the employees. And yeah, California is like, the strictest in terms of trying to protect the rights of the employees. It's interesting.
Okay. Oh, so we touched on this already, but this is talked about overtime that California, 1.5 times the regular rate of pay for anything worked in a single day or 40 hours in a week. The reason I put this one actually was for the 7th day, because a lot of people get confused on the 7th day.
That's interesting.
So I did, yeah. So I put let me go to, where is it? So here, so this is talking about the weekly overtime. So it's 1.5 times this is California and federal, at 40 hours. Some states are over 40 hours and not the 8 hours in a day. And so, that you pay, time off after 40. So then I put here was a little example on how you would pay and what the totals would be.
So if somebody works 7 days in a row, even though they may not have gone over 8 hours on any of the first 6 days, they still have to get paid overtime on that 7th day. That's just
Correct.
the rule, because you're not giving them 2 days off during the week. Here's another question that I have. Years ago, I had
It's just a California thing though, right?
The 40 hour, yes. For this one, yes. For this particular example, yes.
So years ago, I had a job where we had summer hours, right? And what that meant was, on Monday through Thursday, we worked 10-hour days so that we could have Friday and Saturday and Sunday off.
So that's a flex work week. Mm-hmm. And that is something that the company, you go through a process. It's called an alternative work week. So
they can make an agreement that basically the overtime would be waived for those extra 2 hours each day, because they're agreeing to it and saying, okay, we're doing this because there's a benefit on the other side, which is that we get an extra day off.
Yes. But just so you know, doing an alternative work week, it's not just something that you can just implement. You have to write a letter to the state, to your city officials, to your You have to register. There's a whole process behind it that if anyone's interested in it, I have it. I've done it before, but you have to reach out to a number of people and get the approval. You have to do a blind ballot with your employees that says and you can do it by department. So if you have departments and employer has different departments, you can do it that way. But you have to do a blind ballot, and then people have to vote on whether they approve to do an alternative work week.
Interesting. And does it have to be like a unanimous vote or a majority or?
Majority, I think.
Okay.
But like Seth said, it is that where it prevents the employer from having to pay that overtime, and then you get the end result is you get a day off. It's a 4-day work week generally. It also similar to what makeup time is. Makeup time is something that you can do as one-offs. So if somebody wants to say they have a doctor's appointment on Thursday and they want to be able to leave 3 hours early, they would fill out a makeup time request form that has to be done for each instance that says, I'm going to work an hour on Monday, an hour on Tuesday, an hour on Wednesday to make up for those 3 hours. And it won't go into overtime, but it has to be done in that same work week. So if your work week is, Monday through Sunday, those hours have to be made up in that work week for that day that you're leaving early. And that's, like I said, a form that you fill out for each day.
Got it. Interesting. Very interesting.
So I think I had one more. Here's another example. This is if you define a work week Monday through Sunday, an employee works consecutively Thursday through Wednesday. Wednesday does not count as a seventh consecutive day. So again, it's going through, showing you Thursday through Sunday, their hours. It's not a consecutive day because it's not, it goes over a period.
Interesting. So even though it's still 7 consecutive days working, because of the way it's structured, when it starts and ends, it's not
Yes.
a 7. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Any questions? Okay. So this is, I didn't know, this is just a touch on this. So this was the last end of my slides that goes into COVID. So just, there is at the FFCRA. So I wanted to touch on this, and the FFCRA, there is a poster that employers have to post in their business, or if people are off-site, you have to provide it to them. And what the FFCRA does is it says that the employer is responsible for paying an employee up to 80 hours a week, 80 hours a week, and then they're, for certain reasons. So if you look at numbers 1 through 6, it's if you're under a quarantine, if a health provider or advises you to self-quarantine, if you have symptoms of COVID-19 or seeking a medical diagnosis, caring for an individual who is quarantined, caring for a child, or the 6th one, which none of us know what this means, but experiencing any other substantially similar condition. And so depending what that is, can you please, sorry. So those are the 6 reasons. And depending on those 6 reasons, it depends on how you pay someone. So 80 hours, if somebody is, so there's let me see if it's here. Please stop. Sorry guys, please get away. This is what happens when you have children home. This last bullet point that says the FFC requires that employers pay the regular rate of pay for reasons 1 through 3. So if you find that someone has to be isolated, so just the stay at home, by the way, or in some areas it's called a, oh gosh, what's it? It's the stay at home, and in every state they're calling it something different. In most states there's a few different terms, but that's not considered a quarantine. Like San Francisco actually had a quarantine where they had to stay. It was it was an isolation order for a period of time. But if you are, and then if you have a healthcare provider that says that you have to be quarantined or seeking medical diagnosis or have COVID, you would pay up to $511 a day. So someone would get 80 hours of sick time, and then up to $511 a day would be their cap. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So you would get 80 hours, but if somebody makes more than 511, all that you have to pay is 511. But
Okay,
if somebody is caring for a child, they only get 2/3 of 80 hours. So they get 2/3 of 80 hours, but then they also would get the FMLA expansion. So the FMLA is generally for employers that are 50 employees or more. But for this pandemic, for COVID-19, legislation put out that the FMLA expands to under 50 employees. And so they would get 10 weeks of additional leave if they had no childcare or if they had no care for their children. They would then get 10 weeks of leave, but it's the employer pays it now. So there's no state pay for it. The employer will pay up to $200 a day, 2/3 of their pay up to $200 a day. Okay, so the cap that anyone's going to get paid is either $511 for numbers 1 through 3, or or up to $200 a day if you're caring for a child, and then the expansion of the FMLA. So to me, I don't understand why if someone's sick, and then FMLA is generally to care for yourself, that if someone's sick, then there's no leave for them. They only get 80 hours. And so then what happens is they can then go on disability leave. You can then give them, if you are a company with 50 or more employers, you can then grant them normal FMLA leave, and they would then apply for disability pay. So that would be someone who really gets sick. So most people are, I mean, not most, I should say, there's people that are either getting just sick and you have your 14-day quarantine period and you give them 80 hours. Then you have people who are sicker and they have to be out longer. Then you would look into other types of leaves for them that are outside of the FFCRA, because there's now, once they've hit their 80 hours, there's now nothing left for them. So the only place where, under this pandemic, where someone is going to continue to get paid is if you have childcare issues, essentially.
Well, I guess it makes sense from the standpoint that the quarantine would be up to 14 days, which would
Correct.
be 2 weeks or 80 hours. So that seems to be the logic behind it.
Well, but there's people who are sicker, and so then someone who might go into a hospital who then has to go on, hopefully,
but then your regular medical leave would kick in, yeah?
Then your regular medical leave, and you would then apply for state disability.
Right. Another question that came up based on something you mentioned earlier that's really unrelated to the COVID part, but in terms of like posting labor law posters, right? Take a company like mine. There is no office to post it in. We're all remote. What I did, and I was almost doing this to be funny, and those posters are huge. So I actually used my phone and took a snapshot of it, and I created a channel in Slack, called it HR, and I put that up, and I wrote in the Slack channel, you all have to acknowledge that you've read this. I mean, I was sort of joking about that, but realistically, I don't know if that satisfies the requirement or what would be the requirement in those kinds of circumstances.
So there are things called mobile packs. So you can get a mobile pack that will that basically has all your posters, and it's in like a laminated thing, and you can just have it in your office. And then you can also share, one of the requirements is if you have employees that are remote, you can share digital, put in like a Dropbox and share digital copies of the posters. So what you did, Seth, essentially, yes, I haven't had anyone do it that way, but that could work. So you just have to share it with them. So you take the picture and you share it with them digitally and say, here's a copy of our posters, and then you're compliant. But you need to have your compliant, your all-in-one poster, your IWC wage order, which a lot of people miss. Your wage order is your type of industry. And so you need to have that. So if you don't have a big poster, you can just print an 8.5 by 11 from the website. From the internet, you can just pull, whether it's wage order 4, 7, 5, whatever it is, you can just print the 8.5 11 and post it instead of paying for a big poster.
Got it. Yeah, no, these get sent to me for free by the payroll companies.
So a lot of payroll companies will send it for free, but there's some that don't.
Right.
So it just depends on the situation.
Yep. Okay.
So you could ask your payroll company if they have a mobile pack.
Yeah. So basically get a digital version of the document and put it in a location like Dropbox and share it, and make sure that I've made my employees, put them on notice that, what do you call it? That the document is there, that it's up to them to read it and acknowledge that they understand.
So the other thing real quick about the FFCRA, you should have separate line items set up in your payroll, which I'm sure most of you know this, but you should have one for sick and one for FMLA, because what you pay out on this to the employees is you get a tax credit, a payroll tax credit for.
Got it. All right, we got to wrap up here, but Dawn, before we do, I want to make sure that
That's
everybody
really
knows
it.
how to reach out to you, because I'm sure people will have questions, especially other states. You know, and for those of you watching who are in other states, Dawn can research the rules for you in your state. But as Dawn pointed out earlier, the good thing about the fact that this was based on California is we have the strictest rules. If you adhere to our rules, you're more than covered probably in whatever state you're in. But definitely, you know, reach out to Dawn afterwards. Dawn, how do people find you?
So let me give a chat here. I'm going to put it in this chat.
Okay, and I'll make sure it's posted on the website when I post the recording up.
Put in my phone number too. There you go.
Beautiful. All right, Dawn, thank you so much for taking
Thank you,
the
everyone.
time. I really appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
We'll get the recording up, and I'll make sure everybody has access to your contact info for follow-up questions.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you,
Thanks,
Dawn.
everyone. Have a great day. Stay safe.
All right, you too.
Thanks.